Okay, so imagine I'm somewhere outside right now working on my notebook, and I just remember that I had to pick a file from my desktop at home. So I tried to connect to it, but unfortunately it's not working because it's saving some energy. So what do we do at this point? First, just to show you that I'm connected to my phone's network to simulate that I'm really outside. And now let's just open the browser. Let's go into this URL, type my password here. Right, so it's saying that my PC is sleeping and I have the option to wake it up. So I click on that and the PC just started automatically. Now this stays here spinning until the PC is fully woken up. As you can see, it's loading. And your PC is awake, and as you can see, the monitor just showed something. Now next thing is I just wanna connect to it using remote desktop connection, and here we go. We are on my desktop, and I can pick whatever file I want. And when I'm finished with that, I can just go here, say shut down, just like that. You can see it's shutting down, and we're done. If I want to if I want to do something else, I'll just refresh this, and it will tell me that it's sleeping, and I can wake it up again, and as you can see, it just started working again. So this here is just simply a website which is hosted on my server, and show you my server. Well, it's just this notebook which is constantly running on power, never falling asleep. And when it detects a connection from this website with the request to turn the PC on, basically it sends a magic packet to the computer, and then the computer automatically turns on. This is very simple actually, and in this video I'm just gonna show you how to set it up and how to create your application for remote wake up. Before we proceed, it's important to let you know that you don't actually have to follow the coding part. Actually, you don't even have to know Java, because the code will be uploaded to GitHub, and if you don't want to know exactly how this works, you can just skip to the part when I show the deployment part, and you can just download the code from GitHub, compile it, and start using it. Or if you use Docker, you don't even have to compile it, you just have to run Docker build and you'll be all fine. Alright, let's start from scratch. I chose Spring for this project, so we're gonna use Spring Initializer. This is the first screen. Here you can choose your Java version and so on and so on. Actually, Java version doesn't matter. You can choose Java 8, you can choose Java 17, whatever. I chose 11. Clicking next here. Now we can pick a bunch of things. I'm just gonna pick one block because I just like that. From web, I'm just gonna pick Spring Web. From template engines, I'm gonna pick Timelive to have some dynamic HTML. Let's see. Spring security, we don't need that. And actually that's about it. We don't need anything else for our project. So clicking create here, and here we are. It's importing the project and doing its thing. So meanwhile, we can come here and just create a new class. Let's call that home controller, for example. Just like that. Let's create just a simple endpoint. Just like that. And here in the templates, I'm just gonna create file called home HTML. and the body. Now I'm just gonna say hello, and let's run. All right, so because we haven't configured Spring Security, we get this password here. So I'm just gonna copy that, and port is 8080. So let's open the browser. Let's say localhost 8080. Type user and paste the password. Forgot that I have to map this. I'm just gonna copy a new one, and here we go. Okay, step number one is to create some sort of security, because this website is gonna be hosted somewhere. That means everyone who knows the IP or the domain will be able to access this. So we need to have some security, otherwise everyone will be able to wake up our computer. So let's do that. I'm gonna open the properties file, and I'm just gonna paste those two. This is our default username. We don't need to have roles and stuff like that, at least not for this simple application. So I'm just gonna have one username, and I'm just gonna have one password here. Now let's create the security config class. So I'm just gonna add it in conf, just like that. I'll add those annotations: configuration for Spring, enable web security, and enable global method security. This is for pre-authorized annotation. And now from recently, the new configuration is being security filter chain, just like that. And here we need to accept the security. For this application, we only need the login form to be configured. So let's do it. HTTP, firstly CSRF disable. I don't want to deal with that. Then I can say login. Form login, I'm sorry. Form login page, /login. Username parameter is going to be username. Password parameter is going to be password. And default successful URL is going to be the home page. And finally, we can say return HTTP build, and this is it. I'm just gonna throw an exception here. So with that, we have our authentication configured, but we need one more thing, and this is the user service. So now let's go ahead and create that too. For the sake of simplicity, I'm just gonna create the class here inside this one. So static class user service, user detail service. This is a service, and this one has only one method, which is vote user by username. But now we have to import the actual username and password. So admin username. All right, and here I'm just gonna say value. This is the admin username. Value. Admin password. Those are exactly those that we wrote here. And I'm just gonna add required args constructor from Wombok to create a default constructor for us. And actually there's only one thing, this value annotation will not be applied. So to quickly fix that, create a file here called Wombok config, just like that, and just paste this. Actually, we only need this one, but it doesn't hurt the application. Basically, what this does is whatever you annotate a field with this, it's going to be copied into the constructor, so the Spring knows what to inject here. And with that being said, we can implement this method now. First thing, we have to check here if the admin username doesn't equal username, then we need to throw username not found exception. Okay, and if it does exist, we need to return a new user, and the user wants a username, wants a password, and wants a list of authorities. So the password here, we can't just simply pass the unencoded password, we need to encrypt it. So I'm just gonna require here private final bcrypt password encoder, just like that. And I'm gonna say password encoder encode the admin password. Now we don't have these being created, so I'm just gonna create it right here. Oh, I'm sorry. Right, so now this should be properly injected here. We only now need to create our login page. Let's add our security controller. Oops. Controller login. And here we can return login.html. And now we need to go here and create login.html. And I'm not gonna bother you with writing HTML, so I'm just gonna paste one here already created. So we have this title, and here we have this form. The username, we're not gonna type it because it's the default one, so I'm just gonna add it as a hidden one, hidden field, and we only need to send the password. So here's the input for the password, and here's the login. Nothing special here, except that we actually need the username to be passed from the controller. So let's quickly add that. Username, this username, let me just quickly add it. This is value, and it's coming from admin username. All right. Right, I think it's time to test this. I had a problem with starting the application. This doesn't have to be password encoder, it has to be bcrypt password encoder, because here we require exact type. And actually there's only one thing, this time really only one thing, and it is to add the pre-authorized annotation. Here we need to be anonymous in the security controller. In other words, we have to be logged out in order to access this. And in the home controller, here we have to be fully authenticated. Let's refresh. Right, so enter password for root. The password was something like this. Let's click login, and we are here. Step number 2 is to notify the user whether the PC is awake or if it's sleeping. So I'm just going to change this HTML a little bit into this. Basically, we have this parameter coming from the controller, which is called awake. If it's awake, it's going to show that it's awake. If it's not, it's going to show that it's sleeping. And if it's not awake, it will also show this form, which will allow us to wake up the computer. Let's go to the home controller and let's add this parameter. So go out, add object, awake. And here we need to get the value from somewhere. And actually to do that, we're just gonna do a simple ping. So we're gonna ping our server, and if the server responds, that means it's awake. So I need to create a new server service here. I'm just gonna call it ping service. Ping service is gonna have one method, boolean ping the IP address, and how much time do we need to wait for it to ping. So wait. Now let's implement this. Here we basically need to try to do a ping. So this is Java is done in this way. Create address from that IP and just call address is reachable and pass however seconds we want to wait for it. If we catch an exception, we don't really care about that, so we just ignore it and return that the computer is unreachable. So with this implementation, now we can go back here and require the service. And for IP, actually we need to import the IP too. So private final string target IP. It's going to be a value, but we don't have this value yet. So I'm going to go to the properties file and I'm going to say target address IP equals 192.168 and something basically like that. And while we're here, we can also add target address MAC, because we also need the MAC address of the computer, of the network card. So I'm just gonna add a fake one. I think it has to be 6 characters. I'm not sure exactly, but anyways, come back here. Now we have the target address, and here I can say this target IP, and the wait time for now is going to be 2 seconds, so 2000 milliseconds. We're gonna change that, but we will come into that a bit later. Right, so let's restart. Let's go here, let's log in. Your PC is sleeping. And that's because the IP that I just entered is invalid. So if I go back here and change this to, let's say, localhost. Now if we restart, come back here, log in again, your PC is awake. The last and most important step is to wake up the computer. So let's start with that. First, I'm gonna create one file. And again, I'm not gonna bother you with implementation, but I'm gonna quickly explain. So we have this wake up strategy enum file with 3 options here: broadcast to all, broadcast to IP, and send to IP. And what this thing does is basically is going to control how we send the magic package to our computer. So broadcast to all means that we're gonna broadcast the data that we're gonna send the magic package to all available IPs. So basically we return a mask here of 255 across all the 4 sectors of the IP address, which means send to everything. Now broadcast to IP, which is gonna be the default behavior, is gonna get the IP and it's gonna replace the last part of the IP address with 255, basically broadcasting to everything in that final range. And send to IP is directly sending a message to the IP, not broadcasting. This is fine, but it has some issues when the computer is fully off, basically removing the power and then adding the power back. When you try to wake it up with this method, it doesn't work because it wants, when it's not broadcasting, it's basically waiting for a response, and obviously we can't get a response from a PC that is not working. That's why we are going to stick with broadcast to IP. And by the way, this is false here, not true. It's my bad. Anyways, let's continue with adding few properties that we are gonna be needing. Here we are gonna need this magic packet port and this target address strategy. And this, as I said, is going to be broadcast to IP by default, but when you're deploying your application, you can change it. That's why we're going to make it as an environment variable. And this port can be, it's usually 7 or 9, but it can be whatever you want. It can be this. I'm not sure if it can be this, but definitely can be this. Anyways, 7 and 9 are the default ones, so I'm just gonna stick to 7. And now let's go and create the wake up service. This will have only one method, void send magic packet. Is gonna accept string IP and string MAC address. Here is an example of Java implementation of logic for sending magic packages. It's written by a guy named Jumar, so it's actually quite good. So we're gonna use that with just minor changes here and there. Basically what it does is sends this magic packet, and this magic packet is actually just simple structure. If you can Google it, it's just total 102 bytes. And basically sending the MAC address of the network card in a specific way. And this is actually where it's done. So because this would take probably a good 20 minutes to write it, we're just gonna copy that. And here it is. So let's go through the code quickly. First, I've imported the port and the wake up strategy. As you can see, it's broadcast to IP. So here's the method implementation. The only really thing that I've changed here is I added this wake up strategy process IP, which will basically apply the strategy. If we go quickly back here, based on this, we'll have to like return full mask or partially masking the last part of the IP, or directly the IP. And the other thing that I changed is I added this try with resources here, and also set this broadcast method depending on the wake up strategy. As you can see, those two are true and this one is false. And other than that, I think everything is the same, except for this walk. I added walk info coming from Wombok instead of it was system out print. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Now we need to make use of this service. So let's go back to home controller. I'm going to require a few things here. Let's quickly move this up, and also let's require target MAC. It's gonna be a value like that. And we also going to need wake up service. Okay, now let's go and create a new action method, this time post mapping. Let's call this wake up PC. Here we can say this wake up service, send magic packet, the target IP, and target MAC. I'm doing it that way, passing the parameters from outside, because we can change this in the future to have multiple MAC addresses, multiple IPs, so that we can wake up many computers, not just one. Anyways, here we can say return new model and view, redirect to the home page. And now there's only one thing that I want to do, is that I want to make sure that the user sees that the PC has been awoken. So if I do this directly, it will come here and it will wait like 2 seconds, and obviously the computer has been fully turned off. It won't wake up for 2 seconds. It will wake up for 10, or some other PCs even more. That's why I want to make this wait a bit longer when we're coming from here. And I'm gonna use redirect attributes, and here I'm just gonna say add partial attribute, wait, And here I'll just even go ahead and create it as an environment variable so we can configure it later. So let's say this is wake up wait. Let's say 20,000 milliseconds is the default, and I'm just gonna have to import it here. Wake up wait, and here I'm just gonna say wait. Right. And here we need to use that variable, so I'm just gonna require the model, and I'm gonna say int wait equals object require no, just like that. So if we have a wait parameter, it will get it, otherwise it will default to 2000, and here we can pass the wait. And yeah, that should be it. For deployment, I'm going to show you two ways to deploy your application. The first one is simply compiling it into a jar file and running it. For this, you need to have JDK and Maven installed and pretty much nothing else. And to run it, you just simply open a console into the root directory and just type Maven clean package, and this will compile your application. But before we do that, I want to configure a few things. I want to say server port to be something else, for example 5050, and because this is not Docker and stuff like that, you have to set your settings from here. So your passwords and MAC addresses, everything, you can update that and then compile the application. Or if you want, you can set the environment variables manually in the script. This is option 2. But now that we have this configured, I can say build, and once this is done, we'll have a folder called target, and inside we'll have this jar file that we can run. And to do that, we can hop into the target folder and we can say java -jar and specify the jar file to run. Click enter, and it should be running. Let's test by saying localhost at 5050, and here we are. And if you want to run it from a bat file, here's how you can do it. I'll actually even commit that to the repository so you can run it from this yourself. But basically you can set your environment variables just like that, call maven clean package, and then run the jar file. And here, simply by saying run.bat, we should be able to have our application running. So as you can see, it's listening on port 5090, exactly as we said here, and the new password is now tour. So let's go here, let's type localhost 5090, the new password is tour, and as you can see, it's still working, but it's much easier to run. And for the Docker deployment, I have the Docker file. It will be uploaded in the repo. You just need to basically have Docker installed and build your image from that. And I'm gonna show you that, but I'm going to do it on my server directly. So here is my server. It's Linux, but it's pretty much the same thing on Windows too. So first I'm gonna build the image. Actually, first let me show you what images I have here. So this is IntelliJ, it's listing the images in Docker, and as you can see, there's no one for this Wake-On-Lan. And now we type docker build t for the name of the image. Let's call that Wake-On-Lan version 1.0. And then just dot to specify that Docker file is here. And let's wait for this to build. And to run it, you can execute something like this. So docker run the name. This is important. Use the host network. You can specify some environment variables, just like those, server port and stuff like that. And yeah, that's pretty much. Let's run it. And we'll go back here. You can see that now we have Wake-On-Lan and it's running. And a few words about Wake-On-Lan itself. So to configure that, usually we go to Manage, Device Manager, we find our network card here, click on Properties, and here you need to go to Power Management and make sure to check this allow device to be woken up. Now, you might not see this power management if you don't have your proper driver installed. So go to the motherboard vendor. In my case, this is ASRock, or to your network card vendor. In my case, this is Realtek. Download the proper driver, install it, and you definitely see this checkbox. Because usually when you install Windows, if you don't install the network driver, it will install a generic one. And it will work, but you won't be able to Wake-On-Lan and stuff like that. And also here in advanced, you might have to, let's see, what was the setting here? Yeah, so Wake-On Magic packet, this has to be enabled. Wake-On Magic packet when system, I think it's off or something, this has to be enabled. And with this, you should be good to go. Now there are a few settings in the BIOS that you also need to enable, but those vary on motherboard to motherboard. So here's my BIOS. As I said, every BIOS is different, but you generally need to look for one thing, and in my case, it's hidden in this ACPI configuration, and it's called PCIe device power on. And I need to enable this, and as you can see in the description, I want the system to be woken up by PCIe devices. And basically the network card is a PCI Express device, so we need to enable this, and Wake-On-Lan works even if our PC is fully turned off. Now for your motherboard, I've had motherboards that just straight up set enable Wake-On-Lan. If that's your case, just enable that, but for me this is the setting that I had to enable. Here we are back at the notebook. We are on the same website, but the application is the one that we just wrote. It's deployed on Docker on my server. So let's see, when I click, will we wake up the computer? So here I go. And it seems like it's working. Let's see if this will change from sleeping to awake automatically. Right. So this is it pretty much. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this helpful and interesting. And I just wanted to let you know that I'll probably update the GitHub repository to update the HTML stylings. And I'm thinking of making it so that you can update you can wake up multiple PCs. Basically, currently we can only wake up one, and we set this into the environment variables, but I want to make it so that you choose which PC to wake up. Basically, if you have two computers and one server, you want to be able to wake up both of them. I'll try to make it like that if I have time. I don't know. But yeah, for me this tool is very useful. I pretty much all the time use my computer, but I don't want it to work all the time because this consumes a lot of electricity, and that's not good for the environment and for my pocket, basically. So yeah, I hope this was very useful, as I said, and thanks for watching, and hopefully see you next time.